Dear viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program, Out of the Box. Racism, sexism, prejudice, stereotypes, stigma. Sound familiar, right? They sound familiar probably to you and me because we hear them almost every day, if not every hour. Yet, unfortunately, although they seem very familiar nowadays, but they are as old as humanity itself. And tonight, we're still with Aristotle, the great philosopher, the very prominent student of Plato, and the greatest student also of the School of Athens that we stopped with last time. Last time we talked about his view of the universe. But tonight, we'll be talking about his view about races and different sexes and genders. I'm really delighted to be accompanied tonight with Sherry Arian, who will be shedding some light with us on the thoughts of Aristotle and her own personal perspective and views. Sherry, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hello, thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
It's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure, absolutely. And Sherry, to start off, the terms of racism, sexism, stereotypes, stigma, prejudice, bigotry, all these very much linked. There's a big overlap between all these unfortunately very negative terms that we hear about every other day. Can you share or shed some light on your own experience with them? Were you ever subject, or anyone in your immediate, let's say family was subject to any form of racism or sexism?
Okay. I think every woman has experienced definitely sexism. Everyone I know has, especially given where I am from. I'm from the Middle East, and it's quite rampant in the Middle East, where women are always put in their place, or are supposed to be in their place, and that's how I was raised. And I was raised with the idea that, okay, you don't need to work, your husband should take care of you, that type of thing. And I internalized it, and I believed that actually until I learned otherwise, eventually. As far as racism, of course, being an immigrant in the United States, you are going to experience all kinds of things. And one of them is racism. Because, for instance, my accent, right? I do have a very thick accent. So immediately there's that look of, excuse me, what did you just say? And you have to explain yourself like, oh, I am from da, 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 da. That's why I speak like that. And it's like, oh, I'm having a hard time understanding you. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to repeat what I'm saying, right? And it happens. And of course, my sons, I mean, it just, yeah, we experience a lot of that.
So unfortunately, you've tried this, and you're saying that even in your nuclear family, they've also tried forms of sexism and racism. And how about stereotypes and bigotry? Did you try these too? Like someone who would just automatically, the moment you say you're from this part of the world, connection happens in their brain, they would put you in a specific mold that they have in their brain, and they insist that you must fit that mold. And they are bigots. They would never, ever change their opinion about it. And they can put a stigma, a mark on you. Did you try something like that?
Definitely, definitely. It comes with the territory. So I'll give you an example. When I first moved into my house, without even knowing where we're from, just by looking at us, because we look Latino, Middle Eastern, it's a mix of that, my family and I. So my neighbor came up to me and goes, "Well, how many families are going to live in this house now?" I'm like, I didn't catch on, right? I'm like, oh, we're 4 people. Was he worried about a large family or what? And then eventually, once we settled in, the wife came to me and goes, "Oh, we thought you were going to rent out every room because of, who you are." I'm like, "Oh, Lord, thank you. No, we're 4 people. We're living in the house." So yeah, they did change their mind though, just because they saw it. But yeah, there are other instances where you're put in that box and it will not change for sure.
And how frequently do you think that you've been subject to racism, bigotry, stereotyping, and so on? Like on a scale from 1 to 10?
I have to say, at the beginning, when I first came to the States, it was rampant. It was crazy. Now, I'd say it's much less, much less. So I'd say a 3 out of 10, maybe a 4 out of 10 at this point.
Is it because of a change in you, or in the society, or in the neighborhood? Maybe because you moved to a more like multicultural or like friendly neighborhood?
I think it's a combination of both, right? So I've learned more about the United States and how you do things, right? Culture shock at the beginning was horrendous. By now, I've been here long enough. And the neighborhood is extremely multicultural. Everyone around me is all kinds of colors and nationalities, and it's just amazing. So, and work, I have to say, where I work is also like that. So whether it's students, I'm a teacher. So my students are multicultural, teachers are multicultural. It's an amazing mix, actually, where I am.
So where you moved to this like sort of multicultural mosaic, away from like a monochrome society, you would say?
There you go. Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so this is what made the change. So it's not really society per se, but maybe the neighborhood, or like the subculture that you moved to, more than the norm.
Yes.
Oh, whoa. Well, thank you very much for sharing this with us. And I think most of our viewers who are watching you in the United States, or here in Canada, or like in most other adoptive countries, I think they can really relate to what you're talking about.
I'm sure.
Any experiences in your country of origin, in Egypt? Did you experience any form of racism or sexism? Like you talked about sexism in Egypt, but how about racism? Were you ever subject to any form of
That's racism? Funny though. So I am half Egyptian, half Armenian. So we grew up with 2 halves of us, where one group did not like us because we were part of the other group. So the Armenians did not consider us 100% Armenian, of course, because we're not. So we were looked down upon as half whatever we are. Then half-breed, exactly. And then the Coptic part was also concerned that we're half Armenian. So we were, again, shunned. So it was not shunned, but not as, as welcomed as others. So
sort this of is like even marginalized, you would say? Like
Right. Yeah. And this is even within our own families, right? So not even to mention what's happening on the outside.
And okay, so let's stop with a report about Aristotle's ideas about racism and sexism, and then we'll continue our discussion.
Although the Greek philosopher Aristotle was Plato's ideal student, yet he disagreed with his teacher on many matters. Aristotle believed that slavery was a natural thing, and that human beings were divided into 2 types, slaves and freemen. He used to say that some were born to rule, while others were born to be ruled. He believed that slavery was not only necessary, but also very beneficial to the health of the society. Aristotle believed that slaves were also born because their souls were not perfect, as they lacked certain qualities, such as the ability to think correctly, and so they needed masters to tell them what to do. In fact, Aristotle believed that slaves were living tools, such as pets, and were only suitable for physical labor. Aristotle goes on to say that slaves were not completely incapable of thinking, but they only needed a minimum rationale ability to understand and carry out their duties. Likewise, slaves were not without virtue, but again, they only needed enough to fulfill their duties. But their virtue was not enough for them to be treated as human beings. Aristotle explains that, apart from the natural slaves, there is also a class of legal slaves, who were not natural slaves, but who became slaves due to misfortune, as they were captured in war. So they were required to be slaves at a certain time. Aristotle argued that if the world is fair, then legitimate slaves should be freed. And if any of the natural slaves are free, then they should become slaves. Aristotle asserts that war is a natural tool to form government over barbaric societies that are aggressive by nature. He argues that abolishing what he considers natural slavery would undermine civil freedom, and that the pursuit of freedom is inseparable from the pursuit of sovereignty over those who deserve to be slaves. Aristotle praises war as an opportunity for virtue, and writes that the rest that accompanies peace tends to make people arrogant. He asserts that war forces people to be just and moderate. However, to be fair, war must be chosen for the sake of peace. Aristotle held that women were subject to men, but they were superior to slaves, and they lacked the ability of ruling. He believed that husbands should exercise political judgment over their wives. Among the differences between women and men are that women are more impulsive, more sympathetic, more complaining, and more deceptive. In his theory of hereditary factors, Aristotle considered the mother to provide a passive physical component to the child, while the father provided an active element in contact with the form of the human race. Aristotle believed that the primary goal of a society was to be happy. Therefore, despite all what he said about women before, Aristotle gave the same weight to the happiness of women as to the happiness of men, and said that society cannot be happy unless women are also happy.
Dear viewers, welcome back. And now, after watching the report about Aristotle's views about women and race or slavery, first of all, Sherry, can you share your general views, like about this report or about Aristotle's ideas that were in this report? Just a very general analysis. What is the, like, is there a common denominator that you can see in his ideas about slavery and women?
Yeah. When I saw the report, all I was thinking was, we are a product of our culture and our time. And he certainly is. And the fact that they had all these wars and he was so pro-war and there was that whole idea of war being an amazing thing for the culture. Women are marginalized, and of course anyone who's poor is marginalized. So there's a close connection between women and anyone who's poor or not privileged enough.
So you think it's mostly like dominance of the strong, and like, so the stronger would just oppress the weaker.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
slaves are just the weaker people, and women are the weaker gender.
Gender, exactly.
In
Exactly.
general. So it's
Mhm.
it's like survival of the fittest, or like dictatorship of the strong.
There you go. I think it is survival of the oppressor more than anything, right? So the more oppressive you are, the more you're likely to succeed and rise up.
And if we go into more details, if we delve a little bit deeper into the report, so Aristotle says that some people were born to be masters, while
Right.
others were born to be slaves. How did this sound to you?
It's horrendous. Are you kidding? We are going through the Black Lives Matter movement now, and reading this, I was traumatized. I'm like, this, of course, again, he's a man of his time, and this is how they were at the time. But the fact that he believes that some people have to be slaves is an of itself a ridiculous notion now to us. Just like women are not as courageous as men, so women should be pushed down or pushed aside. So yeah, it's quite disturbing reading it now.
And unfortunately, again, like you said, talking about Black Lives Matter or so, it's not far away from nowadays, like from
Right.
this day and age. It's not really far away.
Absolutely.
So he talks about some people were born to be masters, others were born to be slaves.
Mhm.
And how do you see his analysis when he talks about the fact that slaves do not have the same cognitive abilities as masters? So, and they also don't have the same amount of virtue as their masters. So they always need someone to complement them, or they need a supplement. They always need someone to guide them. So they have bits and pieces, but scattered bits and pieces of virtue and intellect.
Hmm.
As
an oppressor, of course, he's going to justify his thoughts and justify what is happening around him. So this is an oppressive way of talking. He is someone who truly, in his own head, believes that some people are less than others, to the point that we can enslave them. And even within that, he made two different categories of slaves. So the natural slave versus the kind of newcomer slave. And again, he's talking about his time. And when we look at it now with what we know, we realize how oppressive and how completely different this is than what we understand now and what we know now, even scientifically.
And the notion again about their natural slaves,
right,
and their unnatural ones. So
right.
Some people were born slaves.
Mm-hmm.
They're more like commodities, or they're more like animals, really.
Right.
So they're like you can count them in heads, just like heads of cattle or sheep. And
right, but he said the same about women.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely get to this in a minute, because definitely that's very, very important. And you being with us tonight, I'd really love to hear your point of view about it. But again, going back to this part about slavery, he says that those who are born with limited capabilities, and thus they are like natural slaves. But there are some other unfortunate masters who were enslaved because of war.
Right.
Now, according to Aristotle, he says, if the world is fair, then any enslaved freeman should be freed.
Right.
Which is something you and I think everyone can agree, would like agree to. We think that,
yes.
Of course, everyone would like everyone to be liberated. But the flip of that, at the same time, he says, but if any natural slave is free, he should be enslaved one more time. So he should never be out of bondage.
Right.
How did you see this one?
What I'm seeing is a dehumanization, which is something that's well known when you're being racist or being oppressive. You dehumanize others. You do not see them as equal people as you are, which is why it's okay to do that to them. And this has happened over the years and years of this. Thinking of the other as not just different, but as not human. And like you said, he did equate them with animals. He did equate women with animals, right? So it's all about lessening the person and making yourself believe that you are right. So when you take people's rights away and you do not give them the education they need, you do not give them the food that they need to stay healthy, you do not give them what stimulates their mind, and then you look at them and say, you're dumb. Well, you caused that. You started that. You knew what you were doing. You prevented me from reaching my full potential. What did you expect?
So in order to have a fair judgment, you should give everyone the same chance and the same, they should all, be at the start line together.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then see, like, whoever gets to the finish line first, then he or she are the best,
Precisely.
the real best. But like, you cannot give someone a head start, and then you want to say that he did better than someone who started from the start line.
Right.
Because the other had a head start. He had an advantage.
Exactly.
He had an edge over the other one.
Exactly. And there's actually a video that physically shows that. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where they have a bunch of students standing in a line and they keep moving forward the more privilege they have, and then they need to start running. And they all have to end at the finish line. And of course, the people who have the advantages reach there right away. It's an amazing, a very powerful video as well.
Absolutely. And how about his view about war? So Aristotle sees war as a as a tool, as a cleansing tool. So it's a great thing to cleanse societies. And he says that it's one of the best ways for us to keep our best virtues and our best attributes.
Right.
Because he says during the times of peace, people tend to relax too much, become too lazy.
And they get lazy, yeah.
Exactly. And this is very counterproductive. And at the same time, they become so arrogant. While war, under pressure, it forces people to become more just.
Right.
Do you see any form, like, is there any contradiction here? Like he says that, war makes people more just, but at the same time, he says, if you free natural slaves, this will undermine the society.
Right.
So how do you explain this contradiction in his ideas?
I'm just thinking, again, he's a man of his time, and he sees that war is the answer to many of their issues. I am pretty sure Hitler was thinking the same thing. It's a good idea to to bring us up, we need to put others down. So it sounds very familiar. Many people have done that over the years. Now, the contradiction, everything he's saying is actually contradicting itself. So if I need to cleanse by war, then we'll be cleansed as well, right? Because others are going to come in and kill us as well. Would that be okay? Is he okay with that? And it has to be that he's okay with that because he was talking in general terms. What do you think?
And actually, if I may share my opinion, but like, I would say again, like, I totally agree with you because, again, with war, then there are definitely hostages and prisoners of war,
Right.
and slaves again. And many of the freemen he wants to keep free will be enslaved again.
Right.
So he is really contradicting himself at the same
Right.
time.
Right.
He's saying something and the opposite. And you mentioned people like Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, General Franco, etc., etc. All those dictators who thought of annihilating all the other races and superiority of a specific race,
Right.
be it the Aryan race or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and creating this pure race, or what Hitler was talking about was the crimson blood.
Right.
So he would create a pool of very perfect genes,
Right.
and the new offspring should only come from this pool. So no Jews, no gypsies, nothing else, only the pure Aryan race.
Yep.
And this is, again, still amazing because we're talking about Aristotle, who lived,
Right.
you know,
In the
before
4th century.
Christ. Exactly. And
4th century BCE. That's
Exactly.
quite interesting.
so, and today, like in the 21st century, we're still witnessing that.
Right. Right.
This still did not go away.
That's right.
Now, moving to talk about his views about women. And he sees women as an inferior, part of society. He sees women as inferior creatures, as he says that women give a negative contribution to the offspring, while men give the positive contribution.
That's
He even
right.
talks about, genetics even. To what extent did you see that as a woman?
So women are the base of life. Without women, there is no life. So the fact that there are people who come out and say women do not contribute is actually funny. Funny in a crazy way. And he's not the only one. There are so many who have denied what womanhood is and what women contribute to society, and how there would be no society if there was no woman. I mean, not even to mention that. I've written a few things that he had said, and I'm like, wow, okay. Things like, a woman is an unfinished man. I'm like, really, really? So there is that idea that woman came from man also, right? So she's not whole, right? I'll move on. So women stand on the lower step in development, right? So man develops and women do not develop as much, that is, right? Superior versus inferior, ruled versus ruler, that it's an amazing list. Weak of will, therefore incapable of independence of character or position. Okay, so women have been held captive basically by men for centuries, right? Since the beginning, not since the beginning, but for a very long time. Women were not allowed to do much. Women were not allowed to make decisions. Women were kept in the house. They have to dress a certain way. They have to behave a certain way. Even in education, women were not allowed to go out and pursue what they wanted most of the time. Even writing, for heaven's sake. They were not allowed to put their own names on their books that they wrote. George Eliot is one example, and I remember that from a long time ago. The name George Eliot, she's a female. They told her, if you put your own name, we're not going to publish it, and even if we do, the book will not sell. So she became known as George Eliot. I will give an example, a very recent example. J.K. Rowling, the lady who wrote Harry Potter, for heaven's sake, they told her, no, if we put your name, Joan, I don't know what her name is, Joan, I think something. If we do that, your book will not sell as much. So they went ahead and put the J and the K, the initials, and then Rowling. So this continues to happen. And then we blame the woman for not being as forward, as smart, as much of a leader, right? So you take all these things. You have to be shy, you have to be sweet, right? You have to be all these things. But then they want her to be a leader. And of course, most women who were raised like that will not be able to do that. Thankfully now we have amazing leaders. We have Angela Merkel, and we have amazing people to prove that when you give a woman a chance, women can do a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely. And throughout history, actually, women have great contributions.
Exactly. Even under oppression. Absolutely.
Exactly. Very true. And we'll actually talk a little bit more about the modern, situation of women. But at the very end of the report, or like of Plato's, of Aristotle's, thoughts, he's saying that the ultimate goal of society is to be happy, is to pursue happiness. And when he talks about happiness, he said, although women are lesser creatures than men,
inferior.
So on the ladder of evolution, they're lower than men.
Right.
But still, he would give equal weight to the happiness of women and men.
That's right.
And he says, society can never be happy if women are not happy. Is he trying to sort of fix what he said before? Is it sugarcoating? Like, how did you see this idea? Like, at the same time, he says that women are inferior creatures, but their happiness is as important as that of men. So unlike slaves, he never said that slaves have any equal right to freedom in any way.
Right.
But women is a different story. Although he admits that they're lesser than men as creatures or as humans, but their happiness is of equal importance as that of men. So is he trying to make up with women, or is he like sugarcoating what he said? How did you see that?
I'll tell you how I'm seeing it, honestly. So in my mind, I'm thinking someone who says these things about women, but in the end talks about happiness or their happiness, has to be thinking of the role that they have put the women in, right? So as long as the woman plays the role perfectly that they want her to play, which is to be the submissive, to be the inferior, to be ruled, to continue to be weak, right? All these things that he had said. As long as the woman continues to do that, she'd be happy and we'll be happy too, right? So that's how I'm seeing it. As long as you do what we're saying, we're going to make sure that you're happy. It doesn't mean that she's really happy. It just means that she's appeasing them and doing what they want. And now they feel happy, so they think everyone else is happy.
So who is appeasing whom? Do you see women appeasing men or men appeasing women? Like the appeasement there is an appeasement for sure. But
There is. I
what
think
is
it
the
goes
source
both
of it?
ways. It goes both ways. Because when a woman does what she's being told, of course, you know, they will do things to them to force them into doing things. But women will appease men by agreeing to the crazy stuff that they ask them to do. Again, being inferior, being ruled, all these things, right? When women allow that to happen, they're appeasing men to just leave me alone. I'll do what you want. And the other way around is men are also, or he is, Aristotle is appeasing women by saying these words. Yeah, we want you happy. We want you super duper happy, because society would not be complete unless you are.
So he's throwing sort of a bait and sort of a decoy happiness, and he sort of wants to appease the woman or pacify the woman.
Pacify, thank you. That's a better word. Thank you.
Yeah. And,
I agree.
Unfortunately, this is what it is at the end.
Yeah.
So
But, you know, I'm thinking of a little child, or even my doggy who's sitting with me, right? So let's go, you know, come here, and I'm going to give you a treat, right? That's how I'm seeing it, right? So Q, go ahead and come to me. And then when she comes, I hug her and I'm like, yeah, I love you, even though I didn't let her do what she wanted, which is go eat a cat or something, right? I don't know what she does, right? That's the same, or a child, right? The child wants to touch a hot thing, and you stop them and give them something, even though it's not equally fun for the child, right? So that's what he's doing. So we'll give you the happiness, that's fine. Just do what you're saying.
But you are always trying to, like you're in a permanent state of achieving atonement for a sin that you've committed
Right.
by just being a woman.
That's right. That's right.
It's a permanent sin that never goes
Absolutely.
away, and there's no salvation. There's no
Nope.
way out.
No,
You
and it
just
starts
need
with the apple too.
Mhm.
Yeah, starts with the apple.
You start absolutely, absolutely. Like who seduced whom? Yeah, women are like, you know, are always the source of temptation and seduction
Right.
for the poor man.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, if we move to nowadays, how different is this day and age? How different are the modern times from what Aristotle was talking about? First of all, in general, like, do you see there is a clear difference between the status of different races and different genders today? Like, is there more racial and gender-based equality than the time of Aristotle?
So let's start with race. I don't think it's much different than the time of Aristotle now. It might look different, but the thoughts and the behaviors of oppressors are the same. You might not see someone actually in handcuffs, but they are handcuffed in other ways. So it might not look the same, but it is happening. As far as women, I think it has gotten better for women in most of the world, but there are certain parts of the world where it hasn't. And it's a lot, actually. It's not just one spot. I can't focus just on where I came from. It's actually a lot of places where women are still seen as submissive and less than and a step below, all of these things.
So it's always the idea of a woman,
Right,
and woman. So
right.
is like the man is just part of a woman, or without the men and the man, there would be just be a woe.
Right.
So, like, it depends
Right.
on which perspective you want to see it, really.
Correct.
It goes both ways.
Correct.
It goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So you think that women have a better status than before. But when you say better, um, is it is it good enough, or still needs, or there's like, what is the room for enhancement? Do you think that there is like so far so good, or do we need a lot of enhancement still?
We certainly need a lot of enhancement, definitely. That we're nowhere near where we need to be, but we have come a long way. We are going to be okay when women in power are equal to men in power. The same number, the same type of powers that women get need to be the same as men. Then we can start being equal. So I'm talking about governments, I'm talking about workplaces, I'm talking about all that.
So not good enough still. So
Definitely.
it's a step on the way. It's better than before, but still
Definitely.
there's very big room for improvement.
Definitely.
For both men, for both like women and slaves or other different races.
Yeah.
You know, as of the maybe the 18th and 19th century, there is a universal call for abolishing slavery
Right.
all over the world. Canada actually was one of the very, very first places, if not the first place, to abolish slavery.
Yeah.
We had and then we had many, many great people who paid their lives for that.
Right.
Ending
Yes.
with someone like Martin Luther King
Right.
and his very famous "I Have a Dream."
Right.
And we had people like Malcolm X, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera,
Right.
and so on and so forth. In the States, we had women like Marianne Shad, many, many, many great people who paid their lives and paved the way for more freedom of
right.
others. Absolutely. But like you said before, although it's better, but still, like maybe today, racism is no longer official. If you use the N word, you'll be penalized. You can go to jail. You're strictly penalized. But internally, people still have the same feelings, or like behind closed doors, there is the same racial rhetoric that's taking place between people.
That's right. That's right. And you see that a lot, and you hear it a lot, right? You hear people discussing race and discussing whether we're getting better, whether we're not getting better. And no, we are not getting better when it comes to race. There is so much that needs to be done, and it has to start with here. It has to start with the thought process. It is not just actions that we are taking. Yeah, actions are important, and laws are important, and support is important, but we need to do something about the thought itself. How do we convince people? How do we get them to see that this is absolute nonsense, that slavery is a ridiculous idea, and people of different races are equal. They are equal to you. Yeah, they might do things differently. That doesn't mean they are inferior.
And again, women's rights. So there are 2 points of views here, and I'd like you to please tell me which side are you taking, or do you have maybe a third view about it? So on one hand, there are some people say, women are much better off today. So they had the suffrage movement, and now they can vote, they can run for an office. Come on, like we have Chancellor of Germany, we have US Vice President, except we had a presidential nominee before who are women. Right. So we have women judges, we have women ministers and managers and so on and so forth.
Right.
So women have like improved a lot, and they go to work like men, although until today, in many places, they don't get the same salary.
The same pay, exactly.
Exactly, as men, although they do
For the
same
same task, for the same amount of time. I mean, we're not talking about different tasks. We're talking the exact same task, exact same amount of time. They get paid differently. Amazing.
which is very, very unfortunate, of course. But on the other hand, somebody's would say, you know what? Actually, women are such poor, innocent creatures. They are now really exploited more than ever. Women are really exploited more than ever, whether they know it or not. And really, men patronized them because today, a man goes to work and his wife would go to work with him. But when they return back home, guess what? The man is the man and the woman is the woman. So the man just sits on his favorite couch watching TV while the woman is busy with her chores. And the man would really fuss if the wife would ask him to run an errand just to get some grocery from the grocery store. It would be, oh, too much. But the woman still has to do all the cooking, all the cleaning, take care of the kids. So people would tell you, actually, women were fooled. When they did not go to work, they were much better off. Mm-hmm. At least they had one job. Now they have two jobs, and they're contributing to the domestic income, just like any other man, and sometimes more. But still, they're doing more work. Mm-hmm. So, which side are you on?
I'm on neither side. I'm on neither side for sure. So the first example, the example of the woman who has become president or whatever, right? These are minorities, right? This is you can count how many women are in power, like we spoke before. So the ratio between women and men who are in government and who are making decisions for us is completely off. So this happens, but it's a minority of people. It's an elite group of people. So I would not say that we have achieved that yet. We don't even have a female president in the United States yet. So even that simple thing. Okay, so we leave that. Now let's go to the other side. The other side is also quite funny. So the woman works, but then she comes home and does everything. That's a ridiculous scenario. That if that is happening, then that is a mess. I can't even explain how much of a mess that is. The fact that you're both working outside the home means that when we come back, we both do that job together as well. If we're both bringing in income, then we are both spending the income equally. We are both working on our home and our family equally. In a scenario where the woman is still working at home full time, that doesn't work for me. Unless, of course, it's a single mom. Now that's a completely different story. If this is a single mom who has her kids or is living by herself, then yes, she will do everything, and yes, she is getting the short end of the stick for sure.
And again, how free are women to choose for themselves today? Because let's look at famous fashion designers and hairdressers, for men and for women. Who are the most famous fashion designers for women? Are they men or women?
They're men, usually men.
How about hairdressers for women as well?
Yeah, men.
It's men. But how about fashion designers for men?
They're men, aren't they?
They're men too.
Okay.
So one might say here, like, how do you see this? Like, do you see that really men are, fashion, somebody might tell you actually, fashion is a way of enslaving women, because the man chooses how he wants to see the woman, and he convinces her that this is the latest fashion. He decides what kind of clothes he wants her to wear, what kind of shoes he wants her to wear, what kind of hairstyle he wants her to have, and then he convinces her that this is style. But when it comes to him, no, he chooses how he wants to look.
I honestly don't know how to deal with this, because I really don't think that they make the decisions. In my mind, I'm thinking women will wear what women want to wear, is what I'm seeing. And many times they say, this is the fashion, and we go in the complete opposite direction. We're like, no, comfort is more important. I'm not going to go with what you're saying. They might try to control, but it doesn't mean that they are controlling at this point. I think that's how I'm seeing it. What do you think?
Okay, so you think that women are not really, they did not fall for it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not taking the bait, I think. At least most of us. Again, I'm not talking about the 1%ers who are going to spend money just to show off. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about women, us, the regular people. We don't follow that.
And what are the most important factors that contribute to the existence of racism and sexism until today? Would you say it's media, it's culture, is it religion, is it science? Like, what contributes to the existence of these things? Like, they have survived with us, these plagues, actually, I would call them, and like they are like extremely malignant tumors,
right,
that really need to be amputated,
right,
or eradicated from the human intellect. But what do you think is the fertilizer or the fuel that keeps them going?
All of the above, everything you've said. So media has something to do with it, not fully, right? Especially lately with the woke kids who are on media, TikTok and Insta and all these things. The kids are taking over a little, so it's becoming better for people who are facing racism or sexism or any of that. So media has a part to do with it. Economics has a part to do with it. Education has a lot to do with it, right? Starting from the base, from our little ones, the babies. What else? Culture, religion, like you said, yeah, all of the above. But not everyone is into religion, right? So you can't blame religion wholly. Might be responsible for a certain group of people, but not the general. Media, maybe certain people are not listening to certain kinds of media, right? So it can't be one or the other. It's really a combination. Education. Education is where I would like to see a huge change in that. And we're starting with racism, by the way.
So do you think the world today is still living in a white man patriarchy? Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, it is. It is.
The dominance of the white race and the dominance of the male gender.
Right. Definitely. No joke. Again, look at people in power. Again, power. Who's making the decisions for the world? It's men. That's all you can say.
And mostly from a specific race as well.
Right, precisely. Yeah. Precisely.
And last but never least, is there a way out, in your opinion? Like, are you seeing, like, in this might change in the near future? Because
I'm hoping. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please carry on. Please carry on.
No, finish your statement. It's okay.
I was just going to say a simple comment here is that one might argue that we're really still in the Middle Ages. We did not depart from the Middle Ages yet. We might be just in the late Middle Ages, but the Middle Ages are not there yet. Because if you want to define the Middle Ages, actually part and parcel, the essence, the heart, the core of the Middle Ages were racism and sexism.
Right.
They were the common denominator in all sorts of behavior that took place during the Middle Ages, and which is something we still have today. The racism and sexism. So we're still in the Middle Ages.
Very true. And I'd call them the Dark Ages. Let's go with that one because it really works even more here. So you asked me if there's a way out or soon. And I'm thinking, honestly, what I had mentioned before, our kids, the woke group, the kids who understand, the kids who get it. And when I say, okay, for me, kids, of course, I'm talking about 20 through, right, or 16 through 40, for instance, right? That age group, of course, more towards 16 through 30 or so, right? With all their media, what they're doing now on the media, how they're outspoken, how they're changing the way we talk about different things. I like that. And several of us were talking about how our own kids in our own home are teaching us what to do and what not to do. So I have one who always insists on recycling, right? Hey, he takes things out of the trash can, right? Okay, let's put this in the right place. And then you learn. They're doing that on social media. They're doing that in their schools. They're doing that when they get together in their gatherings. They are influencing their parents. Yes, some of the older ones are not, people like me and up are not going to listen to them. But the coming generation is going to listen to them. They will live with that. So we do have a group of kids who are coming up who are smart. They know their stuff. They don't care for our opinion. We cannot control them because they're on social media. They know better than we do how to use these computers. So they look at us like we're nothing, like, you don't know how to use that computer, right? And we ask them to come and help. So they do understand that they have power, and they do. And I'm hoping that will make a huge difference.
Well, Sherry, it was a great pleasure having you with us tonight. I really can't thank you enough. And I really hope that our dear viewers can benefit from what you talked about today. So really, thank you very much for being with us tonight, Sherry.
Thank you, Mohammed, for real. Thank you. This was eye-opening and quite interesting. Thank you, dear, for having me.
It's absolutely my great pleasure. So, dear viewers, if we were to recap, really, unfortunately, throughout the ages, humans have said time and again, they've said it far too often, really, that they are, this is the end of the bad times. So during World War I, they called it the war to end all wars. But guess what? Just a few years later, World War II came. And then we had the Cold War, etc., 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 etc. And never, ever stopped. Like the idea of world domination. We had Alexander the Great. Was this the end? No. We had Napoleon. Was this the end? No. We had Adolf Hitler. And so on and so forth. So, and again, racism was part and parcel of this. Always was part and parcel of this. Sexism, again, they always say, oh, okay, it's time to give women their rights and so on and so forth. But on the ground, women still are inferior. they're always on the back burner when it comes to discussing important issues. They always come later after men. Men always have the priority and they always have the upper hand. But unfortunately, women have always to wait. And, you know, the saying says, ultimate stupidity is doing the same actions, but expecting a different outcome. You know, unfortunately, what we've been doing so far is just sugarcoating things. So things might have been legal before, today it's illegal. So racism was legal, like, or yeah, racial segregation until the 1960s, and we had the apartheid system in South Africa. We had it until the 60s in the US, and these are over officially. Again, women, after the suffrage movement and so on, they have the right to run for office and so on and so forth. Now we have secular societies by law. So you have a secular society, so religion does not play a role in determining what things are. But unfortunately, although states today are non-racist states, non-sexist states, non-religious states, we do not have a theocracy. In many countries, we still have, of course, theocracy and racism and sexism officially, legally allowed in many countries around the world. But even if I'm talking about the first world or the most advanced nations, by definition, the government or the country is not a racist, is not a sexist, is not a religious or a theocracy, and it's against all forms of these things. But what we're still waiting for is to have secular people. You know, and this is because the government can control your actions, but it can never control your feelings. And if somebody comes and applies for a job, if I decline his, you know, like if I don't give him an interview, or if I do not give him the job and I tell him because you are a woman or because this is the color of your skin, I'm in very big trouble. But if they come to me and I meet them with a very big smile and tell them, oh, you're fantastic, you're great, we'll be calling you soon. And I'll never do that. It's so hard to control that. It is so hard to control that. But you know what? It always backfires. It always backfires because throughout the ages, like it's a seesaw game, really. There, like some races went up, others went down, and so on and so forth. And we always complain, many people today, from weaker countries, complain that why are the strongest countries oppressing us? Well, guess what? Go and read your own history. When you had the upper hand, you did exactly what they're doing to you today, if not worse. So if we really love our children, if we really want the best for them, because the world is never today and here. It's not here and now. There's always a future. And our kids will live in a different world. They might move to other parts of the world and live in it. We don't want them to pay for our major sins here. If you don't start with yourself, becoming a secular person in the full sense of secularism, and putting aside all sorts of racisms, you know, discrimination based on gender and color and religion, there is no hope. You know, we blame the world, but the world is made of us. If we want to change the world, we have to change first. Dear viewers, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Until we meet again, have a very pleasant evening.